I'm Russell Acord with Expedition Bigfoot. Right now, you're listening to Paranormal Portal. Thanks for joining us, and our guest host is Brent and Jackwagon.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Appreciate you guys joining us today on the Paranormal Portal, and we got an epic show lined up for you guys. I am welcoming Scott from Kentucky, who is here to share his incredible paranormal experiences.
So I go back to sleep, and about 4:30, I feel like there's somebody standing over top of me. I kind of roll over and look up, and there's this woman smiling at me, and her hand's coming down like she's going to wake me up.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net. Scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Hey, Scott, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, brother. And so, as you know, as with all of the stories, they all have a beginning. And I'm kind of curious, where did your journey begin with all this weirdness?
Well, actually, mine kind of jumped around for a little bit. I mean, I had some when I was little, and then kind of, I guess I grew up and didn't really pay attention much.
Uh-huh.
And then when I got a little older, got involved in some alternative health stuff, which I'll talk about later.
Sure.
And I think that kind of brought it about a little bit more because of certain, not bad activities, but like certain things that opens your mind a little bit more without taking any substances or anything like that.
Okay.
So, but I mean, just like, for example, like when I was growing up, my mom and dad, they both teachers, and they had built a brand new house out in the middle of this guy had like a 3,000 acre farm outside of Cincinnati. And, my parents bought a 5 acre lot and built a nice home out there. And, it was just me and my brother at the time. He was 3 years younger than me. I think he might've been one, but for some reason he was away the night I want to talk about. And I was in my room, and the way our house set was when you walked up the steps, and these were like really steep. There was like 15 steps going straight up into the upstairs. And when you got to the landing, you had three choices. You go straight, and that's the bathroom, and then left or right, and master bedroom was on the left, and mine and my brother's room was on the right. And one night I was just laying in bed, and I don't know if it was nightmare or what, but I don't remember walking into my parents' room. I felt like I was thrown into their room.
Oh wow.
And it's, I mean, I had forgot all about this until me and my sister got talking about some things, and this came up, and it was I got thrown into what I felt like was I got thrown into the room. Don't know who picked me up or what, but got thrown into their room, across the hall into their room. And I woke up bawling my eyes out. And when I looked back at where I was at, I saw my parents in bed, but then I looked back, and like my room looked like it was on fire, and looked,
oh my God,
looked like the person standing there looked like he was the Captain Cupcake off of like Hostess Cupcakes. I mean, and he was sitting there laughing at me. I don't know if there was something else there, and that's what I thought of. But
sure.
I remember my parents waking up, and my mom was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, I don't even remember what I said to her, but I ended up sleeping on the floor at the foot of their bed. I refused to go back to my room. But, the next night my brother comes home and he's laying in his bed. I'm laying in mine, and we're fine all of a sudden. So the only other thing that happened at that house that I can remember was my mom had bought a picture of a clown and put it over my brother's bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought much of it, but my brother would always, he'd come running across the room and getting in bed with me, and he'd be like, that clown, he goes, I don't like him. He follows me.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you mean following him? He goes, well, his eyes. He goes, it doesn't matter which side of the bed I'm on. He keeps looking down at me, and that smile he keeps smiling. Well, the clown was smiling on the picture.
Okay.
And so one night I was like, well, we'll fix that. And at the foot of his bed and at the head of my bed, there was a door on each side of the room, and you could open that door, and there was like a dormer. And so I took that clown picture and I'd put it in that dormer, and it'd be gone we'd go 2 or 3 nights and that thing wouldn't come back. It was still in that dormer. Well, we went to school one day and we come back and we go upstairs, put our stuff away, and that picture of that clown's there. Well, we knew my mom and dad didn't do it. They didn't know where it was at.
Oh, wow.
And we'd grab it and we'd put it back in there, and
oh, geez.
never did find out why. And it followed us all the way to Kentucky when we moved to Kentucky, and we would still we ended up putting it in our sister's room when she was little. Even like here, I'm 16, 17 years old at the time, and I'm putting that thing in her room. I'm like, here, this is yours from now on.
Oh, no.
But we later found out that was, found out that there was a girl that was cleaning house for mom and dad, and she would find that and put it back up on the wall. So it really wasn't, I don't know how much paranormal was involved, but it was always like we thought that was there.
Sure.
But when we did live in Ohio, like, we went to a Catholic school, me and my brother did, and we saw, there was we lived outside of Georgetown, Ohio, which is not far from Cincinnati. And if you went down towards the Ohio River, there was a town called Higginsport, and there was a school there. And we had the Catholic school we went to, we didn't have a gym, so we would use the gym at Higginsport School. And so like when I was in 6th grade, I played on the 8th grade team. I wasn't that good. We were just that small of a school that, like in 6th grade, there were 6 people in our class, 6 kids in our class, 5 boys and 1 girl.
Oh my gosh!
And
that's small.
And the girl could beat up all 5 guys. So we would practice in this school. And this school at nighttime, during the daytime, it was scary looking enough, but at nighttime, it was really scary looking. And one of the things we would do at night is we would run. Instead of running laps around the gym, we'd run all the way through the school and everything. And you go upstairs and run down that hallway. It was spooky as can be. And
yeah,
I always saw this thing that looked like a giant shadow just standing at the stairwell as we're getting ready to go right, and we'd go right past it and go down the steps and everything. And 3 or 4 of us would talk about it, but it never did anything to us, so we never really, we just I don't even know what we thought about it.
Right.
And like when you go, then you go down the steps and you come back through the hallway on the bottom to go back towards the gym, you'd hear something like "quit running the hallway" or something like that. And we always thought it was, I really did. I thought it was like one of the janitors that was downstairs in the basement that was staying late until we locked up. And so really didn't think much of it, except for that shadow. The shadow just scared the crap out of us, and probably ran faster than we ever ran before. And so we, I don't know, about 6 months ago or so, I was on the Discovery Channel just watching different episodes of Paranormal Lockdown.
Oh, okay.
And oh my gosh, Higginsport School was on there.
Really?
And they interviewed a guy that used to be a principal at that school who was also a superintendent over the whole school district, and I knew him real well. Used to hang out in his office when he was at the high school. And he was on there, and he was talking about the shadow and the voices and the ghost and his personal experiences. And I was like, oh my gosh, for once I'm validated.
Oh yeah, that's powerful, especially since the activity was still consistent, through all of those years.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wow.
But I mean, that pretty much ended things because I really didn't have any experiences until towards the end of my college years. I had graduated school with 2 bachelors, one in exercise science and another one in health education. And
okay.
I did the community health education, and so I had to find a internship. So the internship I found, I had to do 2 for exercise science and 1 for health education. Well, the one with health education I did was with a wellness center in Lexington, Kentucky. And they did things like, they taught like Tai Chi, Qigong, Qigong,
yep.
Yoga and Hatha yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoons and Sunday evenings, they would have these specialized classes like finding your aura, or they had another one where this guy claimed to be a psychic and he was helping others to unlock all that. Well, me being the intern, I got to be the test dummy for everybody.
Okay.
So one Sunday evening, I was sitting through this class, and they had me sitting in the middle of this room. They had all the lights off. They had some candles here and there, and there was like 12 women and 3 men standing around me, and they had blindfolds on, and they would walk towards me, and whenever they thought they felt my aura, they would stop. Okay. Well, then if that wasn't weird enough, the next week the teacher asked me to meditate while they were doing it, and whenever I felt them getting closer to me, to tell them to stop. So I was doing this, and I could feel people coming up closer to me, and it was really weird, but I thought they were like within 3 feet of me. And I'd say stop, and I'd point to whichever way. And once we finished, these people, there were some people that were still like 12, 15 feet away from me, especially behind me.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, "You have opened up something." Well, I didn't think much of it. And at the time, I was living in a house that my great uncle owned, and he was still in Louisiana. His second wife had passed, and he was down there taking care of the estate and all that. And so I come home one night, and no one had told me about the history of the house that I was living in. All I knew was my uncle's first wife had passed, had no clue she passed in the house, found out that later. And I found out that my great-grandmother had passed in that house. And I found out that I was sleeping in the bed she passed in.
Oh my God. Wow.
But I didn't know that right away. And while I was doing my interns, I was actually driving back to school to take one class I needed to finish to graduate. And I did that like Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays one week, and another week I just do Mondays and Wednesdays. And so every Monday morning I was getting up about 5 a.m, go work out, and then go on to the to school for that one class. And so one Sunday night I go home, I get everything ready for school, and I go to bed. And like I said, I normally wake up about 5 o'clock every morning. Well, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard something in the house, and I kind of looked up, and the bedroom I was sleeping in, there was a door next to the head of the bed, and that led into the back family room, the TV room.
Okay.
But you can make a quick right and be in a vanity area of a bathroom, and then there was another door that led to the actual bathroom. And then at the far from the foot of the bed to the right, there was another door, and if you walked out that door, you were in this small little hallway where if you turned left, you went to the master bedroom, you turned right, you went to the bathroom, and if you went straight, you went into the front living room and onto the door.
Oh, okay.
Well, so I woke up and I looked towards the foot of the bed, and I see what looks like a woman walking from the master bedroom into the bathroom.
Oh.
And I first thought in my mind was the lady that lives across the street forgot something, came over to the house to get it, and walked back across or something like that. And so I didn't think much of it. So I go back to sleep, and about 4:30, 4:45, I feel like there's somebody standing over top of me. And I look up, I kind of roll over and look up, and there's this woman smiling at me, and her hand's coming down like she's going to wake me up. And, all right, so I'm a pretty good-sized guy. I'm about 6'8", wow. And
jeez.
Thought I wasn't scared of it, hardly anything. Well, I got underneath the covers and hid like a little baby, and sitting there. And when the alarm went off, I reached out. I took my hand out of the cover, slapped the alarm, came back into the cover, and kind of looked at my watch, and it's like, just 5 more minutes. And I didn't hear anything, so kind of peeped out of the covers, didn't see anything. So I got up, and I walked out the door to go to the bathroom I use with the vanity. And then when I walked out, in the corner of my eye, at the far back of the TV room, in the back room, there was this rocking chair, and that woman was in this rocking chair just rocking away.
Oh my God, that's intense.
So I go back into my bedroom, grab a bunch of stuff, don't even look, go into the vanity, take my shower, and get my clothes on, grab my book bag, and within 10 minutes did all that and was out the front door. I don't even remember shutting the front door.
That's a lot to absorb.
Yeah.
Wow. That's intense.
So, yeah. So when I went to school, I think I even missed the gym that morning. Went to school, came back, went to my internship, did some office work there. And then when I came home, instead of going straight into the house, I went across the street. And the lady that lived across the street, her and her husband were real good friends with my aunt and uncle. And so I asked her, I sat up there and we were talking, and I said, hey, by the way, I said, did you see I left the front door open? And she goes, yeah, I went ahead and shut it for you. I was like, okay, thank you. I said, were you over at the house around 4 o'clock this morning? She goes, no. Why? And I was like, oh, nothing. I said, have you all seen, like, does someone have like a wife or a mother or grandmother that has dementia and just walks around and goes into people's houses and everything? She goes, no, why? And I was like, oh, nothing. I was like, I just asking questions. I said, I thought I saw something, that's all. She goes, you saw your great grandmother.
Ooh.
No, I said, nah. I said, I don't think so. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. She goes, yeah, you do. And so she tells everybody, like the whole block would gather at her porch every afternoon. She told everybody to leave. And her and her husband sitting there talking to him, and they're like, you know, she hangs out in that house, don't you? And I said, what are you talking about? She goes, your great grandmother, she hangs out there. And I was like, all right. So I told her what I saw, and she goes, that's your great grandmother, and the lady going into the bathroom, that could have been your aunt.
Oh,
and
neat.
she goes, they're not there to hurt you. And I was like, well, they're scaring the crap out of me.
Yeah.
So I went to that guy that taught the class. I saw him on Wednesday nights. He would come back to the wellness center to check a few things. And so I asked him, I said, this Sunday, I said, you like football, right? And he goes, yeah. And I said, buddy, I got the biggest entertainment center you'll ever see. I said, why don't you come and watch a ball game with me? He goes, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't tell him anything that was going on or anything. And later on, I went back to that house, and I didn't stay there for 2 or 3 nights, and finally got the nerve to stay there like on a Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
And so comes that following Sunday after the class, he and we meet up at the house, and I turn on the big screen and the surround sound. We're sitting there watching the ball game, and I had it up a little loud. He looked at me and says, there's some lady who keeps telling me you need to turn that down.
Wow.
I looked at him and I said, what lady? And he goes, you know who I'm talking about. I was like, no, I don't. He goes, yeah. He said, some lady named Hilda keeps telling me to turn for you that you play that TV way too loud and you need to turn it down.
Wow.
And I was like, and he said, and another lady, Paula, keeps telling me that you need to turn it off when you're not using it. And so I kind of like put my face in my hands and shaking my head, and I was like, oh gosh. I said, so Hilda's my great grandmother and Paula's my aunt. And he goes, yep. And I said, well, you need to tell them. I said, if you can talk to them, I said, you need to tell them that I'm scared to death, and they need to just go back wherever they came from. And so he's like, well, you tell them. I said, what? He goes, they can hear you. He said, just go ahead and tell them. So I sat there like looking like a fool and telling them, say, hey, Granny, hey, Aunt Paula, can you please leave me alone and just let me live my life? And and that's about all I said to him. And he goes, he was joking. He goes, well, that is a poor ass thing to say to him. He said, you could at least told him you loved him and everything. Yeah. And so I did. And he said, I think they'll leave you alone a little bit. He said, they're not leaving, but they're going to leave you alone. I was like, all right. So for a couple weeks, I didn't see anything or hear anything. Well, my uncle came back for a couple weeks, and then he was going to go back to Louisiana for another month. And when he came up, he was checking on the house, making sure everything was all right and everything. And this big snowstorm comes in, and we're all locked up in the house. No one's allowed on the roads or anything. And so some days we had television, other days we didn't because of the satellite. Oh, sure. So one day I remember I was in there reading,
and he'd fallen asleep on the recliner, and all of a sudden I could hear him right in the middle of his sleep saying, "Quit that, quit!" And I'd go out and look, and I was like, "Paul, you all right?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." He goes, "Quit trying to tickle my feet." And so I was sitting there, and I was talking to a cousin of ours, and on the phone, and I was telling him what I was watching, and he goes, "Buddy, I'm telling you," he goes, "his first wife is giving him torture." And sure enough, I mean, every time he would never go to sleep in his own bed. He always slept in that recliner. And I found out later through my grandmother that he would always fall asleep in the recliner, and the only way they could wake him up was to tickle his feet, and then he'd get up and go to bed. But he refused to do it anymore, and then I guess that was their way of telling him to go to bed, and he wouldn't do it.
Oh, neat.
But
that's some great stories. Yeah, those are great. Wow.
Yeah. And then when I was doing my internships, I started working for this hotel in downtown Lexington, and there was this manager. He started out as a security guard manager, and then he ended up being the hotel manager at night. And when he did that, I became like I guess they called us rovers or whatever. We just walked around, just making sure all the doors were locked. And like the door to the roof was locked, and we always had to walk up on the roof. And that was like the highlight of our night when we did security, to walk up on the roof so you could see everything, but just make sure no one was up there and everything. And one night I remember walking, and he'd been pestering me all night. He was sitting there, and basically he would get on the radio and ask where I was at, and then he would come up near where I was at and try to scare me at night.
Oh,
well,
okay.
One night he'd been doing that several times, and I'd catch him, and like I'd hear the door to one of the stairwells close, and I'd hear steps, and I knew it was him, and I'd always wait for him and hide from him. So I was up, I don't know, I was like maybe up on the 20th or 21st floor, and I was had just left so I left the 21st floor going to the 22nd, and the way we had it set up was the doors would lock from inside the stairwell, not on the outside or the inside the hallway.
Oh, I see.
And so when I went up to the 22nd floor, the door was locked. And it wasn't like a button. You had to use a key to unlock it and lock it. So I took my key, and it was locked. It was in the unlocked position, the key was. But I couldn't turn it. And I heard giggling on the other side, and I'm like, Ken, if I catch you, I'm going to get you good. Well, I radioed down, and I'm like, to the security guard down there where I had the cameras, and I said, look on the 22nd floor and see who's holding the door. And the guy comes back on the radio and goes, there's nobody holding the door. And I was like, well, where's Ken at? He's small enough he could probably get out of the camera. And Ken gets on the phone, and he's like, hey, he goes, I'm down in the front desk.
Ooh.
And he goes, what's going on? And I said, well, somebody's outside or inside the hallway laughing, and they're holding the door. I said, I can't unlock it. So Ken and another maintenance manager, they're like, we'll be right up. So they come up, and one comes up through the stairwell and meets me, and Ken comes down off the elevator in the hallway, and he's walking towards the door. And we're sitting there trying to turn it. It won't turn. And so Ken gets there, and when Ken gets there, the door opens.
Wow.
And I said, I know you've been there the whole time. He goes, no, I've been at the front desk. He goes, go downstairs and look at the camera. I said, I will when I finish. And so when I finished, I went back down, and sure enough, I checked the film, and sure enough, he was there, but there was nobody holding that door.
Oh, my God.
And I heard from maintenance that it's usually like three floors down is where it usually happens, but it got me right there. And then there'd be times I'd be walking in that hallway, and you'd hear somebody in the like walking behind you and like flipping your sport. Like I always wore a sports coat, and then they'd always flip the back of my sports coat up.
Oh wow!
And then I'd turn around and look, and there wouldn't be anybody there.
That's a lot of activity. Wow. Was there a lot of history to this building?
Not that I know of. I mean, it's not nothing that I ever saw.
Okay. Wow.
But probably the craziest thing that when I was in Lexington was I had these two friends. One played volleyball at one of the universities there in Lexington, and her roommate. We always hung out. And her roommate, I think her name was Sarah, she supposedly she could talk to the dead, and she could see them as well.
Oh, okay.
And I never told them about my experiences, but evidently she could see a lot more than I had ever witnessed or saw in my life, because one night we had driven over to my townhouse, and there was a big empty field on the other side of it. And we were just sitting in my car talking before we went up, and all of a sudden Sarah looks at me and Kristen and says, she starts screaming, and she goes, "Get me in your house as quickly as possible." And I was like, "What's wrong with you?" And she goes, "There's people walking in that field, and they're headed straight for us."
Oh, no.
And I'm looking, and I'm thinking, this is well before The Walking Dead. But, I mean, I was looking, I was like, there's no way. No. So I get her out of the car, and she goes, I'm trying to get her out of the car. She goes, no. Pull in the garage, shut the garage door, and we'll go up that way. And I was like, okay. So I did, and me and Kristen kind of look at one another, and Sarah goes upstairs, and I get her a drink, and she goes, "I'm staying here tonight." And I looked at them both, and I was like, well, there's a bedroom over there. You all go for it. And didn't hear anything rest, but about a month or two later, we were in a little town called Lawrenceburg, which is not too far from Lexington. And we were going over to my grandparents' house, and actually I was getting ready to go on a trip with some cousins to Memphis, and I was going to let Kristen and Sarah have my car. And my cousin had messaged me and said, "Hey, I need you to stop by the store and pick a couple of things up." And I was like, okay. So, of all places, I turned around in the front parking lot of a funeral home. And so when I did, I kind of stopped, and the lights were shining a little bit on the door of the funeral home. And this funeral home was like an old house at one time, and Sarah was in the back seat, and she just starts slapping me in the head, and she goes, I need you to get out of here." And I was like, "Why?" And she goes, "Those people are looking out the window at me, and they want me to come in there, or they're coming for me."
Oh my God, that's horrifying.
And I said, "Well, what do they look like? I might know." And so now she's mad at me, and she's hit me upside the head. And I'm like, "No, seriously." I was like, "I know a lot of people from this area." I said, I started describing a couple of people, and she goes, "No, I don't know. No, they're not like that." She goes, "Get out of here. Get out of here." So we ended up driving out, and So when we finally made it to my grandparents' house, she wants to get back to Lexington as soon as possible, and so she asked me, "What's the best way to get out of there?" And I was like, "Well, if you go down this road and make a left, and it'll take you to the BG Parkway, and there are no funeral homes along the way." But then I found out, Kristen told me later that they stopped at a stoplight somewhere in Lexington and said she started freaking out again. So she ran about 3 red lights, and she goes, "If you get a ticket in the mail," she goes, "let me know. My parents will pay for it." She said she just kept running red lights, so just to get her home to shut her up.
Wow, that's intense. I don't know what that would be like, but I sometimes find myself envious of those kind of people. But at the same time, I also think maybe it's a good thing I can't see what they see.
Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of things that I've experienced it, but just thankfully, I saw my grandma, what I thought was my great grandmother, but that's about as defined as I've ever seen anything. Nothing like this Sarah girl saw.
Yeah. That's got to be
while I was living in Lexington, I was dating a girl in Huntington. Well, we had gone out a couple of times because I'd still go back and see my family in Eastern Kentucky. And I started dating this girl, and she was a couple years younger than me. I was at the time maybe 22, 23 years old. And she trying to explain this one. So we were in Huntington at her house waiting for her friends to come by to pick us up. We were going to double date at a restaurant or something.
Uh-huh.
And so, 2 young people sitting on the couch, liking one another, start making out, whatever. And every time I would put my arm around this girl, doorbell would ring.
Jeez. Okay.
So I'd go over to, she'd get up, she'd go to the door, nobody there. She'd come back, she'd sit down next to me, says, put my arm around her, doorbell rang. Did that for about 30 minutes. So the last time it happened, I got up with her, and I opened the door, and there was nobody there. And I put my arm around her, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And about that time, the back door, the glass, it sounded like somebody knocking on it.
Wow.
And I said, there's kids playing around. I said, I'll tell you what, you sit here and watch this front porch. I'm going to go around back. And went around back and walked out, looked around, walked back around to the front. I said, did you see anybody run out? And she goes, no. And I was like, well, that was weird. So her friends finally come over, and we're actually sitting on the front porch at this time, and we go out to eat and everything, and we get back to the house, and nothing else. In fact, when we got back, I got my car and went back over to my parents' house, stayed the night, and went home. Went back to Lexington. Well, a couple weeks later, I came back, and we went out again, and again, doorbell ring every time I put my arm around her. Well, after we'd been out for a while, we go back to her place, and she's like, said, why don't you just stay the night, and you can get up the next morning, and we can go eat, and then you can go back to Lexington. I was like, okay, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
So it came time to go to bed. We go upstairs, and I lay down with her. And as soon as I rolled over to cuddle up to her, it sounded like somebody walking up the steps.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, I looked at her and I said, well, do your parents live here? And she goes, no, my mom's got a house on the other side of town. I said, well, what about your dad? And she goes, well, he passed away about 6 months ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, who owned this house? And she goes, my dad did. He gave it to me. And I was like, oh.
Wow.
So didn't think much of it. And then all of a sudden, we fall asleep, and I rolled over and I guess put my arm on her, and all of a sudden I hear knocking on the door, on the bedroom door. And I was like, that's it. I'm going downstairs. I slept on the sofa. Slept probably the best sleep I ever had. Next morning, told her, I said, I like you, but I was like, I don't think your dad likes me. And I was like, time for us to go.
Oh.
And that was the last time I ever spent in that house.
Yeah, you were being chaperoned, it sounds like. What happens next?
Things kind of died down for a while. I ended up moving back home, and I found out I needed another class to finish the second degree, so I moved back home and hung out with my grandparents for about a year so I could go back to school and finish that one class. And once I did that, I picked up a second job working for a guy about 2 towns over. He had a massage therapy school, and he needed someone to teach anatomy and physiology. And I thought, I can do that. And so when I first started, everything was fine. We were in this one building across from the courthouse, and no big deal. Well, the longer I worked for this guy, the more I found out his business practices were less than ideal.
Oh,
and we got kicked out of he said we had to move to a new place because where the school was at, this lawyer wanted it for his law offices. Come find out later, he got kicked out because he hadn't paid the rent.
Oh, yeah.
But and it became a habit about every 3 or 4 months having to move locations. But we moved into this building that was on the first floor. It was the old post office, and on the second floor it was the old courthouse. And first couple weeks, no big deal. We had a day class and a night class. So the first thing I remember of anything substantial was in my day class, I had this one female student. She would sit up front, and the classroom the place that we'd set up the classroom, it used to be the old judges' chambers, and it had a bathroom in the very back, a private bathroom in the back. And what we would do, we'd open that door, and it had like an exhaust fan that would blow air out. And so we would turn that fan on so it would cool down the room. Okay. And so especially during the day, it could get really warm in there. Well, this girl, I'm up at the board going over some things, and this girl stands up in the middle class, walks back, and shuts that door. So without missing a beat, I don't do anything, don't say anything. And then after about 30 minutes, it starts getting hot in the room, and I'm lecturing. And as I'm lecturing, I walk to the back, open the door, and prop it back open. 5 minutes later, she gets up and she shuts that door again. So this happens every 30 minutes for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I'm getting ready to break for lunch, and I had just opened it back up, and she went back, and I said, if you shut that door, I said, we're going to have problems. And she goes, well, I have to shut the door. And I was like, why? And she goes, because the man in the bathroom keeps staring at me and smiling.
No. Oh, terrible.
And I was like, what? And she goes, the man in the bathroom keeps staring at me, smiling. And so I go back and look in the bathroom, and I don't see anybody. And I'm like, well, where's he standing? And she goes, she's standing right next to you at the sink. Oh. And I look at the sink, and I look a couple inches down from me, and I'm like, she goes, he thinks you're funny. And I was like, well, that's nice. I said, well, can you tell him to go to another room so we can finish class? And she goes, No, he likes to listen to you. And I said, well, can he sit back in a chair back here and we can keep this door open? And she goes, no, he likes it in there. It stays cool. I was like, I know. I'd like some of that cool air to come into here. Yeah. And she goes, no, just leave the door locked. And I was like, fine. So I didn't say anything. We break for lunch. And I go to, there was another office on down the hallway from us. And there was a realtor office. And I went into the realtor and I asked her, I said, do you know anything about a guy that likes to hang out in the bathroom back there? And she goes, no. And I was like, I got this girl. She keeps telling me there's a man sitting back there. Well, her colleague looked at me and goes, well, that must be Judge so-and-so. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah. He said, he's been dead for about 20 years. I said, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
And he said, well, don't. He said, just ask him to take a seat somewhere else. I said, I did. He likes the bathroom. And he started laughing. I said, you got a picture of him? He goes, yeah, somewhere around here. And he finds this little, like, 8x10 photo, and he hands it to me. And I take it back to class, and I just lay it face down on one of the desks. Students come back, and this girl's sitting there right up front. I had the door open, and she goes, I told you to shut it. I said, before you shut it, I said, I need to ask you something. And I showed her the picture, and she goes, that's him.
Wow.
And then a few minutes later, she goes, well, he'd like for you to hang it right up there behind you where that clock is.
Oh, neat.
And I was like, fine. I said, will that help things? And she goes, it might help a little bit, but he's still going to sit there and watch me. I was like, okay.
That's incredible.
Then, so night classes would run a little late. And one time so my office, I guess, used to be the holding cell. And then where they did their actual massage therapy practicums and all that, that used to be the, like the clerk's office, the processing room and all that. And so one night, I had some other work to do, so I told the students to hang out in my office, and I was sitting there going over some stuff for an exam for them while sending out some emails and this and that. And I wasn't paying much attention to what's going on, and I looked back, and two of the three male students that were in our class, they were sitting in the very back, and they kept looking up the door. And I was like, so finally I asked them, I said, what's going on? And they said, well, there's, don't you hear all that walking back and forth in the hallway? And I was like, well, it's probably the guy upstairs that works for the coal company. He goes, no, so we saw him go downstairs a few minutes ago. And I said, is it coming from upstairs or is it on our floor? And he goes, on our floor. He says, don't you hear that? And I was like, no, I don't hear anything. And so we take a break and we walk out. And the only thing I saw was the back door shut. Mm-hmm. There was like at the very end of the hallway, there was a closet door, but we were always told it was always locked, never open it. Well, I went back to open it, and it was locked, of course, but I saw the door shut.
Oh, okay.
And I said, guys, it's probably one of the building maintenance guys. I said, there's probably a stairwell inside that. That's the reason they tell us not to open it. And so everybody's like, yeah. Well, we get back and we sit down, and all of a sudden our class over anatomy and physiology went from there to the ghost stories that they knew. And so this one female, she looked at me and she said, she goes, you know, I was coming up the stairs the other day, and when I got to the landing, right before I turned left to go into the classroom, she goes, there was a man standing in the middle of the hallway wearing a long, like a longer coat from like the 1920s or 30s and had a top hat on. And I was like, really? I was like, well, Halloween's like a couple weeks away. I said, maybe he was getting dressed for that. She goes, no. I said, well, how do you know? She goes, well, he smiled at me and he tipped his hat at me, and then he walked right through the doors.
Yeah, there's no costume that'll do that.
Yeah, I was like, where the door? So stupid me goes, were the doors closed? And she goes, well, yeah. And I was like, oh. And I said, which door did he walk through? And she goes, the courtroom. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then another girl, she said, yeah. She goes, yeah, I saw the same guy, and said he walked out of the courtroom and into the bathroom. And I said, well, ghost got to pee too, I guess. So,
sure.
So one night, so our classes basically were Monday through Friday, and on Saturdays I used to go in there and whatever I couldn't get, because not only was I a teacher, I ended up being the administrator of the school, because the guy who owned it and ran it ended up falling ill, and his family asked if I would take on a lot more than what I had planned on. Uh-huh. So I'd go in on Saturdays and do all the office work, and sometimes I'd be in there late, like midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And one Saturday I go over there, and they're having a party downstairs in the post office area. So I was like, okay, we got a lot of people. I can go upstairs. I can get work done. Won't be bothered. Mm-hmm. Let the ghost bother them, not me. So that was my thinking, or wishful thinking. So I go upstairs to my office, and I leave the door open, and I just start my desk faced the door, but my computer faced away. So if I was at my computer, my back was to the door. And so I'm sitting there typing away. It's about 11 o'clock, and all of a sudden I hear, hey, I'm going to shut this door for you. And I'm like, okay. And the door shuts.
Okay.
Didn't think anything of it. Door opens a few minutes later and says, hey, how long do you think you'll be? I said, probably another hour. He goes, okay, good deal. Shuts the door. So about an hour goes by. I go and open my door, and I look out. There's nobody upstairs. Okay, shouldn't be. So I go downstairs. There's still some party goers and everything. And so I went to, I noticed there was, they had put up some barriers so you couldn't go upstairs, and also the elevator had been shut down. And so I got through the little barrier, and I saw one of the building maintenance guys, and I was like, hey, I appreciate you shutting my door. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, you came upstairs and asked me how long I'd be. I said, about an hour, and you shut the door. I said, first you said, hey, I'm going to shut the door for you. I said, then you came back and asked me how long I'd be. I said, about an hour, and you shut the door back and said, hey, thanks for letting me know and all that. He goes, no, I've been sitting right here.
Wow.
I said, what about your other buddy? And he goes, no, he's been right here with me. And he said he went to get something to drink back there. I said, well, who came up the steps? And he goes, nobody.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, no big deal. He goes, how long are you going to be? I said, I'm probably another hour. He goes, well, we'll probably be gone, but everything will be cleared out. He said, but we're going to keep the elevator shut down for the rest of the weekend. I was like, okay, that's great. So I go back up to I didn't think much about it. So I went back upstairs, got in my office and shut the door. And sitting right next to us is a police station. And so every now and then I'd look out the window and see who they were bringing in or who was leaving or whatever.
Sure.
And after about an hour, I decide it's about time to leave. So I'm getting things ready. And I called the building maintenance guy. I was like, is everybody out of the building? He goes, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, just one thing. I thought you shut the elevator off. And he goes, well, I did. I said, man, I've been hearing that thing go up and down all night since for the last, not all night. I said, for the last 45 minutes, I've heard that elevator going up and down the whole time.
Mm.
And he goes, there's no way we shut it down. He goes, we powered it off completely. I said, well, you must have forgot something. I said, it must be on a timer or something. He goes, no, it's shut.
Oof.
He goes, well, I'm not going to deal with it tonight. He goes, I'll come by in the morning. I said, well, I'm getting ready to leave. He goes, okay. He goes, the front door's locked. He goes, so you got to unlock it and then you know how to lock it back. I was like, yeah, okay. So all of a sudden, as I'm opening my door, I hear 3 more doors just slam shut real loud.
Oh,
so
gosh.
I thought, you know, some houses you open a door, another one will shut because of the pressure, the wind, and all that. I thought it was that. But when I shut my door, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, I made it about 2 steps down, and I heard more doors slamming. And then I hear the elevator open on my floor. It'd been going up and down. It never opened.
Oh.
So stupid me, instead of going straight down the steps, I go back up the 2 steps and get in my office, shut the door. And I called the police station next door to me, and I asked them if they'd come over. I said, I think somebody's in here. And I said, I don't feel safe walking out by myself. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, yeah, there might have been a vagrant get in. He goes, yeah, we'll be right over. So 2 of the police officers, they come over, they open the door. And I told them, I said, I'm not leaving my office.
Yeah.
Well, this one guy, Mark, walks up. He opens the door, and he's like, hey, you ready? And I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. He goes, let's go. And as soon as we walk out, we hear 2 more doors shut. This time we didn't even, I said, leave my door open. I said, for some reason it keeps slamming other doors. And we hear 2 doors slam. We hear somebody walking up and down the steps above us. Mm. And I was like, you know what? Let's just get out of here. I don't even want to see who it is. He goes, no. He goes, let me get my flashlight. Let's just go up there. I walked with them throughout the entire building. There was nobody in that building whatsoever.
Oh, man.
And I told him, I was like, this is the last time I'm here by myself.
It's neat, though, because, I mean, there's so much going on and an absolute awareness of you. It's not just residual, you know. It's not just these, you know, energetic recordings repeating it. I mean, some of it might be with the sounds and stuff, but to come up and shut your door and how long you're going to be, I mean, those are very interactive, and that's pretty incredible.
The last thing I ever did at that building was I went one day we were sitting there. It was me and the guy that owned the place and our secretary and one of the investors to the school was there. And we were all sitting there talking about everything had happened there. Uh-huh. So I said, well, I got this voice activated recorder. I said, well, just turn it on and leave it there overnight. And they're like, yeah. So I opened up that night before I left with the students. I opened up the back door to the courtroom, and I placed the recorder up on the judge's bench, and hit record and walked out. Well, next morning, I get there about 10 o'clock in the morning. I go up. I remember it's in there. I go in and I get the recorder and I bring it back to the office, and everybody's sitting there and they're like, play it. And I was like, all right. So I hit play. And you could hear us leaving. You could hear us shutting the door. You could hear us going down the steps. And I had one of the students say, yell out the time and good night before we walked out, so we had something to go by. And you could faintly hear that. And then all of a sudden, a little time goes by, and then all of a sudden we heard sounds like a gavel hitting the wood. We heard like screaming, like someone. It almost sounded like someone had been delivered a sentence that they weren't expecting, and the mother was wailing and sorrow and fear. And then we heard somewhere along there it says it sounded like we have guests. Is what I heard. And about that time I hit it, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. And I was like, I've heard enough. I don't want to be around this anymore.
Yeah.
So about a couple months later, we ended up moving to another location. I don't think it had anything to do with the ghosts. It was more like the owner forgot to pay some bills again. So,
yeah, that's intense though.
But,
that's absolutely incredible. And I think your experiences are really profound. But I mean, for the most part, they're pretty benign. They're not aggressive. They're not, they're terrifying in their own right just because they happen. And we're not conditioned to expect those things. But I think all in all, they were really kind of beautiful moments that you were a part of, like a living history,
Right.
I think that's really awesome. And I really want to thank you for coming forward and for being a part of the show. I think if you've got more to cover, I'd love to have you come back and tell more of these. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Because, I mean, they're absolutely fascinating, and I mean that sincerely. These are wonderfully fascinating stories, and you've been witness to some pretty incredible events. But again, I think it really speaks a lot to the nature of a lot of the spiritual activity around us. I think oftentimes we look at it from a very terrified lens, but in reality, it's like we're just part of a living history, and that's really cool. So, but thank you so much, Scott, for taking the time and coming on today. I really appreciate it, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
It's been a pleasure here as well. I appreciate it.
Okay, brother. Well, thanks again, and we'll figure out part 2.
All right. All right. Thanks.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows, including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. Y'all take care, and remember, we love y'all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.